This is really important because the body politic or the dialogue, public discourse in this country is so completely broken that me, as an arch critic of Brexit who's been proved right about everything, can describe the Indian trade deal as a benefit of Brexit, where there's the people who sold you Brexit are so bent and morally corrupt, dishonest and ignorant that they're going to be attacking it from the right. Almost every right-wing front page this morning is largely negative. Tax break for Indian workers is the focus that they're going in on. And not mentioning in much of the coverage that it's exactly the same social security arrangement that we currently have in place in about 17 different treaties, including the whole of the EU, Norway and Switzerland. So if a French company or a German company was bringing workers here for less than 3 years, they would enjoy exactly the same dispensations. They still have to pay their taxes at home, which I gather are about the same level. So the claim that these workers are going to be better off than British workers seems to me to be a blatant lie. So no prizes for guessing whose nicotine-stained lips those claims have dropped from first this morning. So there's a blatant lie there. But what makes it worse is the fact that these lies are coming from people whose lies about Brexit caused us to become the first country in history to impose economic sanctions on itself. I mean, there are many reasons to question the deal with India, not least the nationalist, quasi-fascist nature of the leadership. But I don't know quite what it is about Indian workers that makes some people on the right of British politics and media think that they don't deserve the same deal as French workers or Norwegian work. Can you think of anything that might be off-putting to the kind of character that voted for Brexit to reduce the number of foreigners coming here? Why they would be comfortable with French or German or Norwegian or even South Korean workers enjoying this social security arrangement, but having a massive problem with Indian workers seconded here by their Indian employers and still required to pay the National Health Service surcharge. If they were signing up for full social security payments for the 3 years they were here, they'd become immediately eligible for almost all benefits. And that, of course, would cause a massive brouhaha. So it's crazy. And we've talked a lot about how the Labour government's communications are poor. I think that's a slightly unfair depiction because what do you do in a country where people are reaching for front pages like Labour's tax break for Indian workers in the Daily Mail without mentioning that it's exactly the same, quotes, tax break, end quotes, that pretty much every other country with whom we have a trade agreement enjoys. And of course, then you have broadcasters picking up the phone to Nigel Farage and inviting him to spew all sorts of nonsense and misinformation, unchallenged, of course, all over the airwaves. I mean, there are days when you wonder why you bother clinging to the truth or sticking to the facts. The Daily Telegraph, of all places, which is, of course, one of the great Bibles of Brexit, actually does, in its leader page, if not on its front page, does a pretty good job of telling the truth. And again, as with me saying, this is a genuine benefit of Brexit. These are words that I never necessarily thought I'd say. The Daily Telegraph does a pretty good job of telling the truth. And let me tell you what they say. After 3 years of negotiations, Britain and India have at last agreed a trade deal. The UK will slash tariffs on imports from India, and India will do the same for British exports, including whiskey, cars, medical devices, and much else. The deal is good news for British consumers and exporters, a boost for free trade in an increasingly protectionist world, and a triumph for the Brexit vision of reorienting trade away from the stagnating European continent. The Remainer claim that we would be stuck behind Brussels in the queue for future deals has been discredited. And then they go on to explain why Sir Keir Starmer's record on tax and migration will make it difficult for him to sell this deal to the public. It's newspapers like the Daily Telegraph that make it difficult for him to sell this deal to the public. And it's the lies of people like the Daily Mail front page writer who make it close to impossible. I mean, it's insane. And do you know what else is insane? Crazy morning this, actually. What else is insane is that immigration is currently plummeting. The numbers that are largely unreported are huge drops in net migration. I mean, almost almost unbelievably so. I'll have the details of that for you shortly. But of course, it doesn't matter, does it? If you reduce immigration by, say, a third or a half in the 12 months since the general election, which looks pretty likely, looks pretty close to what is actually going to happen, then what difference does it make? If people are still going to be encouraged to rail against it and to hate it all. These are very, very strange times where we can point at the United States of America and despair about the disappearance of truth and the complete denigration of reality and facts. But I'm afraid things here, even with a government in place that is not in the business of offering up alternative facts or blatant disinformation or claiming that a 9-0 defeat in the Supreme Court was somehow a 9-0 victory, even here, given the power of the media and the dishonesty of many political contributors and commentators and politicians, even here it's almost impossible to get a handle on the truth most mornings. So we find ourselves in very, very strange territory. Net migration is currently about half of the most recent headline number. So for the year to June 2024, it stood at 730,000. Since then, immigration is down by 400,000. But would you know that? And everyone this morning is having kittens about 20,000 Indian workers a year coming here on the same deal that French and German workers come on, and having to pay their national insurance and some of their taxes back in India, where they will return according to the contract that brings them here for less than 3 years at the end of their period of employment. It's absolutely crazy. God knows what phone in we're going to have this morning, but this is one of the craziest mornings I can remember in a very long time. The Daily Telegraph simultaneously explaining why this is a really good deal and a very, very rare benefit of Brexit, and then failing completely to tell the truth about all of the misinformation that is halfway around the world before the truth has even got his trousers on. These are the strangest and strangest of times. And no doubt Farage will be popping up in our next news bulletin to spread the misinformation that has gone unchallenged all morning. Absolutely incredible. The people who brought you Brexit are now so bent that they're denigrating one of the tiny, tiny things, one of the vanishingly few things that could be realistically described as a benefit of Brexit. And who cares apart from me? And hopefully you, at least by now. Nobody. Who cares about the truth? Who cares about the facts? You've actually got my late father's old newspaper explaining why this deal is good news for British consumers and exporters. That's you, that is. It's good news for you. But the bulk of the Brexit reporting media, the Brexit supporting media, is trying to portray it as some kind of two-tier deal. It's not a two-tier deal unless the second tier is pretty much every country that we have a trade agreement with. Is it racism? Is there something about Indian people that allows Brexiteers to blithely portray them as somehow being inferior or less deserving of the trade arrangements that we have with European countries or with Scandinavian countries that aren't in the EU? Even, I think, if I've understood things correctly, even with the United States. So there it is. Incredible. 13 minutes after 10 and a really good trade deal with India, albeit one that barely touches the sides of what's been lost as a consequence of Brexit. But if you, as an increasing number of people seem to do, if you genuinely believe that we're going to have to legislate for the post-Brexit Britain, that going back is a pipe dream, an impossibility, then this is a win. This is as good as it gets. And yet, so bent is our media and our right-wing class that they can't even tell the truth about that, except for 2 paragraphs in the Daily Telegraph leader page, which bear precious little resemblance to their own front page splash. It's just incredible. I don't know why Keir Starmer hasn't explained it as clearly as I just have. I think Jonathan Ashworth has done. But so why bother if it's going to be reported like this and if people are going to pick up the phone to Nigel Farage and allow him to spout his ignorant bile absolutely unchallenged and undiluted? It's a waste of everybody's time. I don't know. God knows what it is, but it's not journalism. It's propaganda. Quite incredible.